Welcome to CURES, where we explore the cutting edge of wellness. I'm Kara Sundlund. Today we're talking about a film that will save lives. Below the Belt shares the inspiring stories of patients urgently searching for answers to mysterious symptoms. Here is a sneak peek.
It took me 10 doctors to find someone that believed my pain.
I thought maybe I'm dying or I have some kind of rare disease. Then I go online and find that millions of women are going through exactly what I'm going through.
And we are joined right now by Elise Courtois and Heather Guidon. Both are experts on endometriosis. And I know, Elise, you come from Jackson Labs in Farmington. There's a local connection here. You were actually involved in the film of Below the Belt. This is all ahead of a big screening here in Connecticut and the urgent need to improve women's health care. Thank you both for being here.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having us.
So what is the big problem right now with endometriosis?
Lack of awareness and education. It really starts with that. I think if we have more public health education, more accurate public health education, that really intersects with the secondary needs, increased research funding, larger public awareness. We need to shorten the time to diagnoses, and we need to ensure that people are getting access to quality care much, much more quickly.
Yeah.
If at all.
Yeah, and at Jackson Labs, I know you are researching, but there's actually a bill in Connecticut that would give more funding. Do you see that as something very necessary?
It is extremely necessary, but unfortunately the funding for endometriosis is not optimal. Endometriosis has been historically underfunded by the federal agencies, so we really need this push from the state level to really promote research and to really help us getting the tools we need to investigate endometriosis.
So let's go to the movie first, Below the Belt. I mean, unless you suffer from endometriosis, you might not even really fully understand it. And certainly what the film raises questions is that a lot of times doctors don't even diagnose it.
Absolutely. You know, the Below the Belt is really a metaphor for all of the things that are wrong in endometriosis in terms of patients screaming to be heard, suffering in silence, doctors dismissing it, doctors not understanding it properly. I mean, there's lots of folks that can't even get the definition right. You know, they position it as a menstrual disease. So that really cuts out half the population that's struggling and affected. Even when you do get a timely diagnosis or a diagnosis at all, then it becomes a secondary battle to have access to quality care. And, you know, the bill of our legislative working group is really precedent setting, and it intersects with Below the Belt's policy asks as well, because we all have to come together. This is a disease that needs everybody working on it in terms of funding and public awareness. I
was shocked just to know how common it is that 1 in 10 women will suffer with endometriosis, and I certainly know people who suffer with it, and I've always thought the same thing, that it's really more about painful periods, but it's really much more than that. Can you tell us, what is endometriosis? Let's start with you, Elise.
Yeah, so endometriosis is defined by the growth of tissue that resembles the endometrium, that is the inner lining of the uterus, growing as invasive lesions outside of the uterus. And it is a very invasive disease that forms lesions within the pelvic cavity, so it affects organs such as the ovaries or the fallopian tube or the colon, but it can also be found outside, so affecting the lungs, the liver, and even sometimes, very rarely, has been found in the brain. Oh. So it's a disease that is impacting the body entirely. It's not just a gynecological disease, and it needs to be studied as such.
Yeah. Heather, you have been on your own journey with this. Tell us a little bit about your story.
Oh gosh, you know, much like most people with endometriosis, I just assumed that this is how it was supposed to be, that pain is normal and you just go ahead about your business and you suffer in silence, until I finally couldn't suffer anymore. And I was very lucky in that I was diagnosed quickly after 10 years.
That's quickly nowadays.
That struggle for two decades more. And, you know, this is in the late 80s, so, you know, we didn't talk about endometriosis. Nobody was talking about, you know, GI problems, bowel issues, things like that. And my doctor said, well, I think it's endometriosis. So we did surgery. And he said, yeah, we found it. You'll probably never have children. Here's some medication, and put you on this pill, that pill, the other pill, this injection. And it was just all downhill from there. And it wasn't until I had to physically get on a plane and fly to a specialist. And that is the reality of this disease. And you can only fly to a specialist if you have the privilege to do so. So there are a lot of people missing out on quality and effective treatments, and that's one of the asks of this bill, is to improve access to care, because everybody deserves access to care.
So the bill is called HB 6672, or an act concerning endometriosis. Jillian Gilchrist of West Hartford is one of the sponsors of this bill. What would it do?
So it will address endometriosis at different levels. So what we aim to do with this bill is to promote education of the healthcare providers, education that is being given, for example, in state university or centers that form those healthcare providers. It is also a bill that will increase awareness for endometriosis across the whole state of Connecticut. And finally, it's a bill that is going to sponsor the formation of a biorepository. That is a place where we can collect tissues and clinical data from patients across all the state to form this pool of data and tissues that we need to study the disease in the human across all the diversity of its presentation. So it's addressing endometriosis at very different levels that are necessary to increase our knowledge.
But I mean, we really don't want women to wait as long as you did, 10 years for diagnosis. So for those who might be listening right now, tell us, what are some of the signs and symptoms so you can advocate for yourself?
Definitely. So, you know, I hesitate to say painful periods because I don't want to relegate it to a menstrual disease, but for some folks, painful periods is a symptom of their endometriosis. Gastrointestinal problems, urinary problems. If you have a lung that collapses every month during menstruation, or you're coughing up blood, that could be endometriosis. If you've got legs and back pain with or without a cycle, if you happen to menstruate and it gets worse, that might be endometriosis. Largely, we see it throughout the abdominal pelvic cavity, of course, but we can find it in almost any organ system. So look for things like painful sex, if you're sexually active. If you have difficulty using a tampon, if you're struggling with deep cramping, excessive bleeding during your periods, if you menstruate, and again, you know, the bowel and the bladder are very, very common, although doctors will often tell their patients, no, it couldn't be part of endometriosis. It, in fact, is. You know, in our center, we see countless cases of bowel endometriosis, bladder, kidney, sometimes resulting in loss of the kidney because it's been allowed to go on for so long. So I think patients need to, or people really need to, believe in themselves, listen to their own body, that nobody knows their body better than they do, and if they're not finding help at the doctor with their symptom list, they can find another doctor who will listen.
I'll address this to both of you, but are there good treatments, and what are they?
Well,
okay. Well, I mean, I remember that one of the ways that they seem to, if someone was diagnosed, that they would put you on birth control to kind of just stop the lining from getting too thick, I guess. But that would only affect you, I guess, if it's related
that would sort of err more on the side of adenomyosis, which is a disease of the uterus, because endometriosis is endometrial-like tissue found outside the uterus by very definition. What the medical therapies are doing is simply just stopping some of the symptoms some of the time. It's not actually addressing the lesions themselves. Now, with that said, anybody who has an informed consent and chooses to do medical suppression, that's absolutely an option for them. Do nothing is also an option. It's really up to the patient. But ideally, you want to have a surgical approach as the cornerstone of a multidisciplinary option. That means going and cutting out the lesions through excision, which is something that centers of expertise like ours do. remove the disease, and then you have multidisciplinary components that you can really adapt into your lifestyle, whether it be certain supplements or acupuncture, or diet, nutrition, things like that. Pelvic floor therapy is crucial for many, many patients. You really want to take an integrative approach, but you've got to get that disease cut out, and not all doctors will do that.
Wow. Okay. Tell us about your center and the name of it, so if people are
Sure,
listening,
the
they
Center
can
for
get help.
Endometriosis Care. We are located in Atlanta. We have countless patients from around the world. We've treated patients from over 70 countries. Dr. Sinervo and Dr. Eugenio Colon are our surgeons. They've been doing nothing but endometriosis for years and years and years. And again, we treat patients from all over the world. You know, March is Endometriosis Awareness Month, of course, so we, you know, it's always Endo Awareness Month for us at the CEC, but we really bolster our efforts and support various initiatives throughout the month, one of which, of course, is a free review. Patients can jump on Center for Endo and undergo a free consult with our surgeons at any time. But it's really about pushing the message of awareness, public health education, nursing education, all of the initiatives that intersect between Representative Gilchrist's precedent-setting work and Below the Belt.
Yeah, Below the Belt is the movie, which I think is a great way. Yeah. Maybe it's something you want to bring your daughters to if they're teenagers. Yes. It really addresses endometriosis, but also some of the disparity in the healthcare system of either not getting diagnosis, women being afraid to talk about quote unquote below the belt. You know, like there's so a lot of it is like you said, awareness and making sure. But I want to ask you, Elise, like what do you wish women knew?
Well, I knew that having a painful period where you're a teenager is not normal, that you would find the support that you need to actually being listened and being diagnosed early enough. And I wish also that we can convince everyone at the higher political stances that it is an important disease that we need to address. It's 10% of individuals assigned to female at birth that are suffering from endometriosis. It is a huge amount of people that are impacted by the disease, but also the family of those people that are suffering from it. It is a huge impact on the society. It is billions of dollars of estimated cost per year in the US only. It is something that we need to address really in an urgent manner. So we actually provide answers, cures, and support.
Yeah, at Jackson Labs. So you have cutting-edge research going on right here in Connecticut to figure out a cure or diagnoses or how we treat it?
Yes, so for example, one thing that is obvious for us is that endometriosis is one single name, but it's many different types of lesions for the body. It can be lesions that can have different morphologies, but also different location. And one thing that we need to understand is what is actually composing those lesions that make them different and could help us understand why they seed there to begin with and how they evolve and recur, for example. What drives that after surgery, those lesions will come back again and again. So by using single-cell technologies or other type of biomolecular methods, we can really go deep into those questions and really try to understand the nature of those lesions and how we can address them, how we can find a proper treatment that addresses endometriosis in its whole diversity.
So the screening of the film Below the Belt is going to be free at the Jackson Laboratory for Genomic Medicine. It's going to be tomorrow, which at the time of this taping is going to be March 7th. If you are around in Connecticut, please come. You can go and register for free tickets, jax.org/below the belt. However, I guess if you happen to be listening to this podcast later, as many might be, can you see the movie another way?
Yes, absolutely. You know, Below the Belt is really on tour right now. I mean, there are countless virtual screenings, particularly throughout the month of March. There are regional screenings, there are international screenings, so just go to EndoWhat Below the Belt. You can also find links, of course, across social media. Go to the EndoWhat Instagram page. There are lots and lots of links.
EndoWhat. That was the first film.
Yes.
That was the first film because people didn't know what it was. So, right,
and it's also the name of the organization.
Yeah,
you follow the Center for Endo Care. We post about a lot of them also.
If someone wants to host a screening, can they do that?
They absolutely can. Yeah, just like we're doing for Jax Labs. If you would like to host a regional screening, you can absolutely get in touch with the organization, and they will walk you through that process.
So I'm thinking, as a mom of a teenage daughter, I mean, it's pretty normal that she will say, and I had the same thing, I have cramps, and here's your Advil. And so I guess now I think people are going to say, oh, but that's not normal. But I think for so many women it is normal, and it doesn't necessarily mean you have endometriosis, but I guess, I don't know, so many women have cramps, at least on the first or second day.
And that is normal.
That is normal?
Cramping
Okay.
in and of itself is normal. It's when your pain is debilitating you and you're missing school, you're missing sports, you're missing social functions, you're missing work.
Okay.
That's when there's a problem. If you're not relieving dysmenorrhea with an over-the-counter med, that's when it's time to say this might be a problem. And some folks think that teenagers can't get endometriosis because they're too young, and that's just, I assure you, that's just not the case.
Okay. So, and a lot of times teenagers aren't even going to the gynecologist just yet. Who do you get diagnosed by? Would it be the gynecologist?
Primarily, even
Okay.
though it's a systemic disease, primarily it's still relegated to gynecology. But then that's where you really want to find somebody who understands the disease and is also willing to either refer you out or bring in a team. And when I say a team, I mean interdisciplinary, somebody who's going to coordinate your care with the gastroenterologist, not just pass you off to it, with the urologist, not just pass you off to it, pain management, pelvic floor physical therapist, somebody who's going to coordinate that care, because it really is a multidisciplinary disease.
Is it possible or likely that a lot of women are living with this and just don't know it?
Yes.
Absolutely.
Would you say even more people have it than and don't know about it than actually are diagnosed?
Well,
Yeah,
I
think
would
so.
say that we just have estimation, and we just have ways to guess how many people are impacted because we don't know the extent of this disease, because we don't have a proper way to diagnose it without surgery.
So there's not a way, like a pap smear, we know. There's not a simple test to determine if you have endometriosis.
No.
Right now, how do you figure out for sure that you have it?
You can do a lot of imaging. You can do, pelvic exams. You can do a lot of supposition up front that says, this looks like endo, this walks like endo, but to know that it's really 100% endometriosis, you need a biopsy, and that is surgical. Now, not everybody is a candidate for surgery. Not everybody wants surgery, and that's understandable, of course. You can do some imaging techniques, and if you feel like I would rather hold off on surgery, there are things you can do. There are medical therapies you can try to tamp down the pain a little bit. But if you want an absolute biopsy confirmed diagnosis, then you want surgery, but you ideally want the disease treated at the same time. You don't want to just have surgery for the sake of surgery. You want to make sure that disease is being excised at the same time.
Removing the lesions,
Yes.
wherever they might be.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
And let's talk about some of the treatments. If you do have endometriosis, or maybe some people who are diagnosed out there and are saying, well, I've never had surgery, I'm just doing whatever I'm doing. So what are the best treatments that we know of right now?
The
Well-
best treatments.
I mean,
Excision surgery.
Okay. So that if you get the surgery, does it actually remove the pain?
In the majority of cases, you can remove the lesions and remove the pain, but not all pain is endometriosis. There's no guarantee 100% that it won't come back even after excision. And you have to also address the secondary pain generators, things like pelvic floor dysfunction. You may have adenomyosis, which is a sort of a cousin disease of the uterus. You might have fibroids. You might have other hosts of gynepathologies that also require treatment as well. So it's a very nuanced, very patient-centric decision.
Are there promising new treatments?
Well, at this time, not really, and that's why we really need to invest and to research this disease way more. I will say that surgery is like the gold standard treatment, but it doesn't prevent recurrence of a disease. And as a matter of fact, about 60% of the patients will recur after a sparing surgery. So it is something that needs to be researched and addressed to get better options. As Heather mentioned, the contraceptive treatment of hormonal therapy are basically aimed to reducing the symptoms, but do not address the disease progression or the disease biology. So,
and does it mean that how does it affect your fertility?
Well, it may not affect your fertility, or it can render you completely infertile and lead to things like pregnancy loss, miscarriage and such. For me personally, there was a infertility component But that doesn't mean that if you have endometriosis, you'll never have a child. You know, there are treatments, there are ways to approach it from a fertility perspective. If that is your priority, for most folks with endometriosis, it's living a pain-free life, and the fertility is secondary, but it absolutely is a leading cause of infertility.
So we've seen in the movie, we don't want people to think it's just cramps. I mean, the people in the movie are saying they kind of felt like they were dying. They just, they couldn't participate in life.
Absolutely.
Is that how it was for you?
Yes, unfortunately. I mean, and it was progressive. You know, it wasn't always that way, but as the disease continued to be poorly treated and untreated, I got much, much worse, eventually to the point of being bedridden. And you will see there are some of our patients in the film that you will go through their journey with them, and you will see just how devastating and heartbreaking this disease is. But then you can see the other side. But it's that gap in between getting diagnosed, getting the proper treatment, and being able to live well in spite of endometriosis that we really fight below the belt.
So the film exposes widespread problems in our healthcare system. Yeah. I know that you come from France, and we're lucky to have you here in Connecticut being a researcher. But is this better in other parts of the world?
Not really.
No.
The lack of knowledge and proper treatment is unfortunately something that is across the globe the same. We just don't have a proper way to treat this disease.
Okay.
The failure is universal.
The failure, yeah. Well, we know that in Europe they'll have days, they tend to be more progressive with days off for menstrual issues or things like that. And you know, some will point to universal health care in more European countries. If you could snap your fingers, because this bill is supposed to give more money, right? So if the bill passes in Connecticut, the main thing is more attention, more money, which then allows you to research more, and hopefully we get a cure or better treatments. Right. But what are a couple of things you think could make a big difference right now as far as even doctors becoming aware?
I think the public health education component is critical because there's so much misunderstanding about this disease. You know, like I said, people think that, you know, this is just a disease of normal endometrium floating hither and yon and causes painful periods. Let's yank out the uterus. And that's just simply not the case. So I think a very robust, widespread public health education campaign is key. And I think it leads to all other roads. I think it leads to the increased funding that we need to empower our researchers to get us the answers that we need, which ultimately leads, of course, to, dare I say, one-day prevention, even a cure, which is the ultimate goal. But we've got to improve what's going on in endometriosis for people right now.
Well, we're talking about 10% of women have endometriosis. So you say this amounts to billions of dollars in healthcare costs.
Yes. Yes. Annually, 70 billion right here in the United States, and that doesn't even consider the transgender population and the gender diverse population that we have no measurement for. You know, so there's a lot of folks that are really left out of that count.
Okay.
Our estimate, you know, 190, 200 million, that's an estimate. I think it's probably more.
So also, I think of endometriosis, I think most people have as a disease affecting younger women who are menstruating, but in fact, you could have endometriosis, it's really affecting you in menopause or even if you don't menstruate.
Sure, oh, absolutely. Before your first period, they have found it in fetal autopsy. In research studies, they have found it in men. Men, a few men. They have found it post-hysterectomy, post-menopause, post-oophorectomy. They're really, you know, again, that just speaks to the enigma of this disease, and we just don't understand why it does what it does.
Well, there's also a problem with, you say, women being disbelieved, and the movie really goes into this. So they'll tell their doctors, and we're not here to criticize doctors, but is it just that they're not trained in medical school the way that we need to be for endometriosis? Because, or is it a systemic issue of women in healthcare in general being disbelieved, but there's a lot of disbelief that I guess is a problem.
There really is, you know, and I think it speaks probably because endometriosis falls into that women's health gap, right? There are a ton of knowledge gaps around endometriosis, gender bias. You know, it's supposed to hurt. You don't talk about it. There's a stigma surrounding it. We don't really talk about GI issues, and we don't talk about periods. We need to start talking about it because it will save lives if we do.
So you can die from endometriosis?
Well, I will say that although it's not considered a disease that is malignant, you can definitely have very serious consequences in your life if it's not properly handled and treated. Yes.
We've lost countless people to folks who've taken their own lives because of this disease.
With suicide because of the pain?
Yeah, the pain, the disbelief, the being gaslit. You know, again, it's not about doctors. It's really about the lack of education. I mean, we were talking earlier, and you know, there's this persistent belief that endometriosis only affects, you know, white women, white affluent women in their 30s and 40s, and that's just so untrue. And it really is excluding entire waves of patients who need access to care and diagnosis.
So, Elise, what you do as an expert at Jackson Labs, I mean, they are experts in genetics and biomapping and all of that. So what do we know? Is there a pattern of who gets it? Is it hereditary?
Well, there are studies that basically suggest that there is a hereditary path. We still don't understand really because, for example, if you look at the genetic studies, they can only explain a small percentage of the cases. So there are definitely indications, but again, we still don't know enough to really have a concrete map of how it is transmitted and how it grows and evolves.
Well, in our final couple of minutes together, I just want to review. A good place to start would be watching Below the Belt.
Absolutely.
Maybe the movie before that, Endo What?
Yes.
Okay, so tell some people where they can get more information so that if you're hearing this going, I think that might be me, what's step one? Where do you get some education?
Go right to centerforendo.com. We've got a ton of information, not just for our patients, but for the endometriosis community. We really serve as advocates, and we try to put out the best education, the best empowering information so folks can make their own informed decisions about their care. So you could just jump on our website, centerforendo.com. You want to go to her lab. You want to read about her research. You want to watch the movies, as you said. Also go to endowhat.org. You can learn more about the policy asks that are tied to the movies and the efforts that are going on. Social media is great if you're careful and you're following the right accounts that put out authoritative information. At Endo What, yeah. You want to make sure you're
so that's one that's endorsed by you guys. And
yes.
Any suggestions from you?
Yes, I'll say also that in Connecticut we still we do have a small community that is active on the disease. So Yukon Health is the center of reference for endometriosis in Connecticut. So Daniel Luciano, that is also a very active member of this group, is
so here in Connecticut, you could go to
surgeon
Yukon Health and you actually could get good diagnosis and good care.
Yes, if you go to the right doctors. Yes.
Yeah. Okay, so at Yukon Health, and name the doctor who's specializing?
Dr. Luciano, Danielle Luciano. She's the director of Minimally Invasive Gynecological Center and the director for Endometriosis Center.
And I know we do a
Health.
lot of work with Yukon Health, so I'll say it's yukonhealth.org, and you can go on there and learn something. So the first step is to really stand up for yourself, and if your doctor doesn't believe you, you need a new doctor.
Yes. Absolutely. Absolutely. There's no reason anybody in 2023 should be suffering in silence or screaming to be heard. There is help out there, and you have an absolute right to obtain that help.
Great. Thank you, ladies, both. I learned a lot. I hope everyone listening learned a lot. Below the Belt is a screening and panel discussion taking place tomorrow. I will be there to moderate the discussion at the Jackson Laboratory in Farmington. To learn more, visit jax.org/belowthebelt. Again, this is March 7th. So if you are listening to this today, please come. It's a free screening, but by all means, we know many of you will see this or listen to it later, and that's okay. Start to educate yourself, watch the movie, follow the social media accounts we've just mentioned. On this show on CURES, we love exploring the cutting edge of wellness, and I know that's what you guys are doing every day, so thank you for educating us.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. It's, you know, anytime we get an opportunity to talk about endometriosis, we are so grateful.
Thank you. Thank you for everyone who's listening, and please share this with someone you love. You can follow me on social media at Kara Sundlin. I like to share this content there. Have a good day, everyone, and be well.